Cultivated Marketer, episode 47, From Transactional to Relational Brands with Justin Ricklefs. Well, I think we are about to have our listeners hear from somebody, and they should give a damn about this episode, I think.
Oh, I see what you did there, Chris.
I think this is one episode they should give a damn about. You guys like that?
Yes. Well played.
Yeah, no, I was so glad we got the terrific Justin Ricklefs on because several of us, again, I know, thankfully, our show is moving beyond geographical boundaries, which is great, but we do happen to be located here in the greater Kansas City area, and Justin was the keynote speaker at the terrific KCIBC Business Communicators Summit just really only 4 or 5 weeks ago as we record this, and just really captivated I think he was the lunchtime keynote with his presentation on his philosophy. He runs an agency called Guild Collective, and really his philosophy is kind of give a damn, the catalyst for caring companies, and really emphasizes, I think, a lot of the things that we've talked about on the show before, right? So clarity, connection, creativity, obviously, and branding. Although I love that he's careful you could just tell under the surface, right? That marketing word, he understands it, right? But he's looking for something deeper, which I think is what's really so cool about him.
Yeah, what I really loved about Justin is I know him, like I said, we go way back, but he really does practice what he preaches. So he's a good follow on LinkedIn, especially if you're someone who's wanting to lead well, lead a team well, build something well. He writes a lot about how he leads his team. And so the things that he teaches, I think from his book and just when he goes into work with clients, I think that's something he really, really, really tries to live out himself. So I think that's good. But the thing I kept hearing him say was that people ask him and his team to come in to help them tell their story. He's a storyteller is really what he does. And if you work in marketing, and if you're listening to this, you probably do, you work in marketing and communications, you know that at the heart of what you're really trying to do is tell a story. Yes, you're trying to make sales. Yes, you're trying to hit all these metrics, but none of those things will happen unless you're telling a compelling story. And he does a great job talking about how they do that.
I think the storytelling angle, even the way he frames the metaphor of a fire in the matchbook, which we talk about, but I've got to go back to what Matt offered around Justin's adverse reaction to the term marketing. And I particularly loved it because in this course of this conversation, he's talking about breaking, he didn't say it explicitly, but what I took from the conversation with him was the talking about it's all our responsibilities within an organization to be able to be advocates and share the story of our organization. The organization needs to garner our trust to do it. But he mentioned in the course of this conversation, he mentioned the recruiting team, human resources. He mentioned the impact groups, so the community impact group, the community care groups. He didn't explicitly mention, but I heard him mention functions of internal communications and change management. So the notion of this idea of collaboration, and Julie, you asked that question about the marketer's role and internalizing how they need to think differently about their role. I would contend this really was a great episode for not just marketers, even though that's in our name, but all manner of communicators in their functions, whether they're explicitly a communicator in title or they're even somebody in HR that works with a given public at any point in time. I just love this episode from that standpoint. And I did find the t-shirt shop.
Okay, good. Might need to drop that in for the show notes.
Unknown plug for Raygun.
I wondered if it might be Raygun.
It's Raygun. Yeah, it's a t-shirt shop in the crossroads of Kansas City. If you would like your own It's Not Heaven, It's High V t-shirt, then hopefully they still have those in stock. I don't expect to run a 300 coming at the Raygun shop for that t-shirt, but that's where my wife bought.
I love it.
Probably a good place to break and have you guys enjoy this conversation with Justin Ricklefs. Welcome to Cultivated Marketer, where we talk marketing professional development so your garden of opportunity grows. This is Brent Bowen.
I'm Matt Tidwell.
And I'm Julie Masson.
And our guest today is the founder of Guild Collective, a brand consultancy that helps companies grow by getting clear on their strategic story and building cultures that care from the inside out. A Kansas City native, he's the proud husband to Brooke for 23 years and a father of 5. Boy, he's busy. And he brings a deeply human lens to the way brands grow and connect. Before launching Guild, he spent 8 years with the Kansas City Chiefs as director of partnership development, where he learned firsthand that growth follows when relationships come first. Key theme in a lot of our conversations of late. In 2017, he left the corporate world to build something different. What started as a one-man operation has grown into a strategic consultancy, helping organizations define who they are, elevate customer experience, and create internal alignment that drives meaningful results. His personal mission is to be fully alive, which I heard at the KC IABC event. He was fully alive, and we're going to bring some of that energy today. And he helps others do the same. Justin Ricklefs, welcome to the show.
Holy smokes. I appreciate the kind words, Brent. Great to be on the show. And Matt, Julie, great to be with you guys. Great to see y'all again. And I just feel really grateful to be in this room and part of this conversation.
Well, we're so glad to have you. Okay, Justin, I have actually known you for a long time. Matt and Brent, you might not know this, but Justin and his wife were one of the first families that my husband and I met when we moved to Kansas City. So when I met Justin, he was working for the Kansas City Chiefs. And somewhere along the way, a lot of people also don't know this about me, I started the Kansas City Moms blog. And Justin was such a great friend. I would sometimes ping him and be like, you think this is okay? Because I didn't know sales. True marketing, I didn't really learn until I did Kansas City Moms blog. So Justin, you might not remember this, but there was a day where I was at the Hy-Vee, my local Hy-Vee, and that Hy-Vee was run phenomenally. Every time I went, the workers were kind, they were cheerful. The store was just well run, and I noticed. So we're going to get into this, but your whole theme of giving a damn, I didn't have these words then, but back then I would have said, dang, whoever runs this store gives a damn about this store and about these people. So there was this day I was at the store and I noticed someone in a suit talking to the store manager. And I was like, okay, that guy's probably an executive. So I was like, I kind of want to go tell him that this store manager is doing a phenomenal job. And I was like, that's awkward. Don't do that. Well, I did it. I went up and I interrupted their conversation and I said, excuse me, I just want you to know that this store manager is doing a phenomenal job. I never met that guy, but I just told the executive, this store manager is phenomenal. He's doing a great job. His employees are phenomenal. I love coming here. Well, I don't remember when it was. I think it was later on that day, that guy found me and gave me $100 gift card to Hy-Vee. I was like, hey, thank you. I didn't do that to get anything. So I pinged Justin. I said, guess who I met? And he was like, dude, that's like the CEO of Hy-Vee or something like that. Somebody really high up. So Justin made an introduction to me, which gave me an opportunity with the Kansas City Moms blog. Like that is who Justin is. You're always willing to make a connection, make an introduction. And I think that whole story just speaks to the reason you like that story is because you want people everywhere to just give a damn about what they're doing and who they're working with. So it's a really long intro, but I had to share it because I don't even know if you remember that. So do you remember that?
I vaguely remember, and I'm pretty sure it was Randy Edeker, who's a former CEO. And Hy-Vee does such a wonderful job of building. They've got a system, right? A corporate system, but then they have an empowered store director who was ultimately incentivized by the performance of their individual stores, profit loss. In its most like simple form, Hy-Vee built a brand on human connection. And their tagline, so to speak, which we would call a Guild, a brand heartbeat, their tagline is, or used to be, they built it on helpful smile in every aisle, right? And it's kind of catchy and it's got some interesting marketing language to it and all that, but it's true. And you experience that, which was you feel a certain way when you go into a place and you can tell people care. And that's the whole thesis of the stuff we're trying to communicate is how do cultures build around care, not as an either or, but a both and. And so, yeah, Julie, it's really cool to see all these years later what you're up to. And it was fun running into you literally like backstage right before I went on stage. And I was like, yo, dude, I'm really nervous. And you're like, you got this. And so anyway, I do remember the KC Moms blog. And it was really, like those were fun days.
That was a different era. I did sell that business after 6 months because I wanted to be back in the nonprofit world. And although I am a mom, the mom world was not really my jam. So I sold that business. But anyway, that is where I had a little bit of a connection with Justin in the business world. And you were so kind. So that was when you were at the Kansas City Chiefs. So you spent years at the Kansas City Chiefs. How did that experience shape the way you think about brand building and partnerships today?
Well, yeah, I just have so much fondness for. I wrote about this last week on LinkedIn because Guild hit our 9th anniversary. And in my resignation letter at Arrowhead for the second time, I actually worked there twice, which is a weird wrinkle in the story. But I resigned the second time on March 17th of 2017. And I remember typing to my boss at the time in the letter, which said, I'm willingly quitting the best job in the city. I mean that. And they weren't even that amazing. They weren't the Chiefs that everybody knows from the last decade. They were building to that, but we endured a lot of non-Super Bowl years when I worked there. But obviously the relationships, both internally and externally, are number one from my experience there. And I had the fortune and the privilege of being able to, kick above my weight class a little bit, or punch above my weight class, I think is the correct phrase, because, I'm this 30s kind of up and coming professional. And because I had a arrowhead on my lapel pin, I had the ability to go get a lot of meetings in the city. And I just hardwired, was really curious about those individuals. And so I think the professional relational skills that I had the ability to develop was a wonderful gift, truly. And then just to be able to understand how, and again, that word partnership that you used, Julie, a lot of the kind of old school sponsorship language was evolving then. And so people were used to like purchasing transactional stuff, like give me a sign and a suite and some tickets, and we'll call that a sponsorship. But the way that the marketing, as it needed to, evolved, and people were under higher scrutiny for these levels of spend, these truly had to be beneficial programs. And so the language even shifted from sponsorship to partnership, or assets to programs. And so I was involved and helped lead a team that started to think about these as program designs, not sponsorship assets. And of course, it's not that simple in black and white, but having the leadership of Clark and Mark Donovan, and having the ability to be in rooms that, frankly, this kid from Gladstone, I was finding myself in these conversations. I was like, holy smokes, these companies are really smart and they love what they're doing, but the void, and this is where the entrepreneurial part kicked in, was like, they don't really know how to tell their story. And they're looking around for some help. And they think that the chief's responsibility is to help them tell the story, or the chiefs think that the client's job is to tell the story, or they've got these other agencies or whatever. And we're not the only people doing this, but I was just like, holy crap, how do they not know how to do this? So at its base level, I was like, I think I could help them tell their story in ways that lead to growth, not just lead to cute, creative things, but lead to growing their business through the power of story. So I don't know if I answered your question or went on a long diatribe, but I just am so grateful for my time there.
Yeah, no, that's great, Justin. And well, by the way, welcome to the show, and congrats on the success of Guild Collective, the anniversary. That's really terrific. So many kudos on that. Hey, I want to ask you a little bit more just philosophically, because obviously we were just talking about the grocery industry, right? The retail industry. Companies still tend to many times default to that very transactional kind of mindset. And well, if you're in the grocery industry and you're not moving inventory off the end cap, right, that's a problem. I mean, that's sort of, they live in that space. But and sort of you get in this mode, though, if you're too transactional, sort of chasing the short-term wins. But I know that you all talk about making that shift into more of a relational brand mindset. So explain that mindset, please.
Yeah, no, Matt, it's so good to be with you. You teach this for a living, so I feel a little bit intimidated that my answer won't be amazing.
But you're going to come speak to my class, my friend. So we're going to turn the podium over to you.
He takes School of Hard Knocks people to come into the classroom. He allows that from time to time.
They're always the best.
Literally the only way I've learned anything. So what I'd say, Matt, is the essence of the things that at Guild we see and care about are helping brands discover their heartbeat. And what we mean by that is a lot of agencies have done one really wonderful work. And in this era of incredible noise and nonsense, in this kind of lovingly call it whack-a tactic, which is just like hey, let's chase some more stuff to sell some things. Like we should show up in AI. We need SEO. Like none of these things are bad or wrong. Okay. So I'm not villainizing the tactic. Tactics are really freaking important. You can't just have heartful conversations all the time. But the brands who don't have to severely discount, who don't have to chase, who don't have to convince, who don't have to play the same game, they all have really what we see as 3 vital signs to be a human first brand. They've got clarity. So that's number 1. They've got connection. That's number 2, both inside and outside. You can't like put up a billboard if your team hates working there and your clients feel the dissonance. They might not say it. They might not kind of consciously, it might not come into their consciousness of like, oh, that brand doesn't have a very good or healthy internal culture. And therefore their marketing messages aren't going to resonate with my subconscious, right? Then nobody says that, but they feel it and they see this stuff and they're like, something's off there. And then they go on about their busy, painful, weird, lovely existence. And so clarity, connection, creativity. Those are the 3 vital signs of a healthy heartbeat from a brand standpoint. And creativity, we don't mean, what we don't mean is like, is the logo the right color, or is it cute, or does it, does it pass the creative test? It's no, does it evoke human emotion? Because we're storytellers, we're human beings that are honestly in lots of ways craving something that moves us. And so the brands that we're seeing and sensing, quote unquote, win in this really competitive, weird, noisy landscape are the ones that are returning with strategy to humanity, not to tactic, but they're coming back in and they're going, okay, how do I make our team love working here? As simple and kind of silly as that sounds, how do we make sure that our people like it? How is the energy good in our building? How do the leaders show up in ways that, give a damn? And then ultimately, is the client experience delightful? Go back to Julie's comment at Hy-Vee. They didn't put her in a focus group. She was like sitting there working on her blog and was like, oh, damn, these people are really cool and nice and friendly. And like, oh, by the way, why is everything clean? And people are like polite and they bag the groceries in a way that shows that they've got a system and a process. It's not haphazard and random. And so like all that's for us, human first branding, which is how do we get clear on what actually matters? And in all of the chasey, kind of like tactic conversations, a lot of that, at least it's been in my experience, that we don't really want to do the hard human work. And so we think this other thing might solve our problem. And it's like, okay, it is messy and it's a little bit weird, but like, let's get clear on the human first brand heartbeat.
Yeah, I love that. Hey, one question, Joseph, are you worried at all? We've been asking this to our guests recently because, of course, there's been a lot of research that have come out lately, Edelman Trust Barometer, other tools that talk about how actually premise of your agency on getting back to humanity, I think is probably very well timed, right? Because we're seeing less and less humanity with this issue around polarization and incivility, I think is kind of the word you're seeing in a lot of the research from Edelman and others. Does that worry you, or do you really feel like that's an opportunity for you to, because eventually we'll come back to what matters, right? I mean, it seems like your agency is sort of well-timed for this time we're living in.
I maybe should be concerned about that, Matt. I don't know. I honestly think this isn't new or novel. Like this is an ancient art form. It's an ancient essence. Like we are created to be meaning makers and storytellers. And if we don't shape from a brand standpoint, if we don't help shape the story, then the gap is going to get filled in with some other version of that story. And so I love, Seth Godin, who's like the goat of all this stuff. He talks about, hey, your brand isn't what you say in the boardroom. It's what story is told about you when you're not in the room. And that's a human thing. That's not some flash in the pan. Like this is a new trick. We're going to talk about humanity now, guys. Like this is a return to something that sometimes feels lost in modern quote unquote marketing. And I kind of like rebel against, I'm like, we're not really a marketing agency. It's kind of annoying to call us that. It's like, we're helping you get clear on what to prioritize in your business. It's really good for business. Chick-fil-A's figured it out. Chick-fil-A figured it out. Like when you care about people and you want to make money, those two things are not fundamentally opposed. They actually compound in really great ways. So anyway, Matt, I think if we were using this as like a platform or position to like try to be cute and novel, I think I'd be afraid. We're a team of 7 and we're, kind of swimming in this big ocean of big agency. And we're just going, hey, sometimes like, I add your CAC and your ROAS and all these like crazy acronyms we throw around. I'm not saying they're not important. I'm just saying if you don't have clarity, connection, and creativity, it's kind of like, ancient, I'm getting off track, but Matt, I think the simplicity of human connection is actually really freaking hard. And most leaders don't want to do the hard work to do it. And we're just helping kind of shine a light on like, it actually is really good for your business and your humanity if you focus on this stuff.
Yeah. And Matt, I had a similar question. And actually, Justin, I didn't think you were deviating. It was exactly where I think I wanted to go. It was let me just say this. If I knew that this episode was going to start with a conversation around Hy-Vee, this may be the only episode my wife will ever listen to.
Oh, I love it.
So speaking of mom blogs, she actually owns a shirt that says it's not heaven, it's Hy-Vee. She owns that.
Where did she get that? I need to know where she got
it somewhere in the Crossroads. I'll have to find out where she got it, Julie.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, but you actually started it, you started to talk about CAC and you started to talk about return on investment and return on ad spend as we've been breaking down some acronyms here. And that was the question I was going to ask you is, when you get into those C-suite conversations, it may not be with the chief marketing officer because he or she or, they may speak that language. They know what you're talking about when they're talking about clarity, connection and creativity. But when you're sitting down with the CEO, they're going to ask those questions about CAC. How, in a practical way, what questions are you being asked in that regard? And how are you building that bridge to those conversations?
Yeah, Brent, I think it's a lovely question. And that t-shirt, I've got a good friend who's the CIO at Hy-Vee, and we need to get him that t-shirt. It's so great. So what I'd say is this is a mix between our own journey as an agency to get clear and strategic on what we're actually good at versus what we want to do because we need to make payroll or we need to impress a client or we need to say yes to like keep the thing going. Okay. So there's a blended answer of our own growth and saying like, again, those things are not wrong or unimportant. We just choose not to focus on them. We have partners in Kansas City who run big agencies who do that stuff for a living, and they're awesome at it. They're really sophisticated. And when those conversations are part of an overall evaluation of an agency's work, it should be a part of the mix, right? Like it's got to work. What we're choosing to do is go, hey, we just want to be more upstream. And sometimes it feels like agencies get, and again, I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just saying like, we've done it. Like we start chasing all this like recurring revenue work or retainer work, which ultimately slips into this weird kind of place of like, what's the actual value and what's working and what's not. And you become this like outsourced, I'll put myself on these hooks. Okay. But you get like hung on this hook that you don't even work at the place. And then they're exclusively looking to you to solve their business problems that you don't have full ownership over. Okay. So anyhow, there's a lot of there's some entrepreneurial baggage here on my own, but what's so life-giving is that we've started to just say like, yeah. Like have the CAC conversation, have the LTV conversation, have the ROAS conversation with your media agency. That's not us. What we want to be is your heart partner so that your brand stays clear, connected, and creative so that then you can measure the hell out of all this other stuff down the road. If those 3 vital signs are jacked up, you can't, I'm not a MD clearly, but like my dad had open heart surgery in 2016. He drove himself to the hospital and thought he was just going to get a quick checkup and like get back to work. And the doctor's like, no, bro, like get your ass in the bed. You're having surgery tomorrow. He didn't say like, oh, like take this medicine and like try these, fingertip exercises or maybe do some squats. That might help your heart. And he's like, no, your heart's sick. And that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to help brands get clear on is like with no judgment, like your heart's sick. And if you get clear, connected, and creative, all this other stuff will flow from that place, from the inside of the organization out. And it's generative and it's growing and it's good. It's not like fighting upstream to like prove value to some shareholder, you know? And frankly, Brent, one more little random tangent is we also know our place. Like the Chili's CEO is not going to call us. That's fine. But there is Main Street and mid-market, Midwest and national companies all day long who are kind of overlooked by the quote unquote bigger agencies that are coming to us going, hey, can you help us tell our story? And we're like, yes, we can. We'd love to actually.
Yeah, no, that's a great articulation of that. And also the complexity of, as you mentioned too, I think the marketing space, I know you prefer not that marketing word, but there's storytelling elements. And then when you've developed that strategy around getting clear on those three things, you're like, here's a list of great partners that can help you get deep into the analytics of it and be your retainer partners to have it live on. It's just not us, right? It's knowing who you guys know who you are.
Finally. We all figure out eventually. Okay, everything you're talking about, Justin, really speaks to culture, which is one of my favorite topics. And we talked about that with Mike Farag too in a previous episode. So, which I will say, the Hy-Vee that I referred to earlier, I was just there yesterday. I still go there all the time. It has different leadership and it is not the same. It is not run as well. It is not as clean. The workers are not as friendly, not as efficient. So I'm telling you, my big thing that I always say is if I experience a company that's running really well, I will say, oh, they've got good leadership. And leadership is what drives good culture, right? So if you've got good leadership, you're usually going to have good culture. In fact, my husband and I, before we moved overseas, we had a terrible experience with an unnamed airline, but it's not Southwest, Delta, or American, so you can figure out which one it was. And I remember as a 25-year-old boarding this plane and having this terrible experience, I remember telling my husband, these people don't want to work here. I don't think they have good leadership. I don't know that I have the words to say they don't have good culture, but culture really matters. So you've talked about this a lot, and you talk about culture driving everything from the inside out. So what's the biggest gap you see between internal culture and external brand experience?
Ooh, I love that. When people think brand equals marketing, it's so limited to a department or a piece of the whole company puzzle. So if we just talk about external experience, there's marketing, there's sales, there's client delivery, there's referral, there's community, there's connectivity. So there's all these other touch points beyond the marketing space. On the inside, it's recruitment, it's onboarding, it's daily rhythms and rituals. It's how do we talk about to each other? It's even stuff as simple as like, are we retaining our best employees? It's like, nobody wants to be retained. It's like, what a weird word. They want to be invested and empowered. They want to grow. And so, Julie, I think what part of the struggle is that people look for brand to be this kind of fix-all to cover what leadership hasn't maybe wanted to pay attention to or invested in. And when you were telling that story, what came to mind for me is I will also be unnamed, but this is a positive story. We have a client in the manufacturing and production space with 10 nationwide facilities and more than 10,000 employees. About 6 years ago, they realized they were struggling to fill these hard to fill, difficult jobs in small towns across the country. And they were hemorrhaging on the kind of people side, HR side. And this group made this really honestly courageous and bold decision to, and it sounds simple, it's way more complicated, to ask their employees what they thought about working there. Okay. They called it an employee opinion survey, EOS. I had all these fancy buzzwords. I hired this big consulting firm from Chicago to learn from thousands of employees. The number one thing that these production level people wanted was for their supervisor to know their first name, period. It was like far and away. And then it took the humility though for those supervisors to say, I actually don't know your name, Julie. You've worked here for 3 years and I don't know your name. So for a while, not forever, but will you put a piece of tape on your hard hat that says Julie? And then every time I see you, I'll say, hey, Julie, instead of hey, you, or hey, or yo, or hey, dude, or hey, girl. Right. And so I think that's the stuff that is like, culture isn't a committee, it's a growth. It's like, you can't put like a pizza party together and call it culture. Culture is what it is based on the work of to your point exactly, the leaders and their team to get clear on what are we going to allow and prioritize from a belief and a behavior standpoint. We call those heartbeat principles. Some people call them values. Same thing. It's like, how do we believe and behave that we show up internally so that our client has a delightful experience?
That's good. That's good.
Yep. And I want to touch on one of those things. So unbeknownst, we've talked a lot about organizations getting clear on their story and then living that heartbeat. You were just talking about living that heartbeat. And unbeknownst to either one of us, until about 20 minutes ago, you and I both worked on one of nonprofit's most recognized brands locally. And they had the opportunity to showcase their 165 years helping and serving the community. And you and I both have also heard that work that we've collectively done has been recognized as the best work in the country last year. So that was work we did for the YMCA of Greater Kansas City in celebrating their 165 years. Congratulations, sir.
To you as well. And ultimately to the team, Paige and her team, like what a gift.
Yeah. And ultimately, to the Y, we're just the sidekick. So in that whole equation. So congratulations to the Y. Bring that campaign up, because we've been talking a bit more in hypotheticals and broad brushstrokes around your three components. What did you see out of that particular campaign? Because by all accounts or measures, they had a great gala, raised more money than they set as their goal. They saw this recognition within the community. We work on their podcast. They end up getting great podcast numbers and growth there. What ultimately did you see in that particular campaign that you knew was going to lead to success?
Brent, I love it so much, because I was pulling up our deck. We got called. I knew Paige. This is how Kansas City works, right? Like, I kind of knew Paige. Our business coach introduced us. Paige was looking for her next thing, and then she landed at this really cool job at the Greater Kansas City YMCA. And 3 or 4 weeks into her deal, she called and she was like, "Hey, we have our 165th anniversary coming up next year. We need some help telling that story." That's kind of a general way we get connected. Somebody says some version of that. We need help telling our story. I'm like, cool. And YMCA, global, has really beautiful, but also strict. Here's our brand guidelines. Here's what you can do. Here's what you can't do. All that, which is great. It gives us the right sandbox, and we understand what the constraints are. And then we start digging in, and I'm sure it's like this with all of you guys to a degree. Like, they already knew the answers. They needed some help kind of framing it back up in a way that was compelling. They knew what they wanted. They sensed it. Paige had an incredible vision and an incredible team, and she just needed some help synthesizing it. And I'm looking back at the work we presented in the proposal stage. Okay, so not the actual work, but the second slide on our proposal says, we want to tell the human first story of the YMCA of Greater Kansas City's impact on the last 165 years worth of stories, and how they're poised to accelerate future generative growth. And we have a picture of a YMCA lifeguard putting a life jacket on probably a 6-year-old boy. And it's like, of course it's about the YMCA, and we needed to increase membership and fundraising and all this stuff. But it's like, it's about the stories of this city that you've already lived out. And what do we get to go do for the next 165? And Dawn Mundy on our team deserves all the credit. She's our director of strategy and creative. And it's really simple when you say it when it's done. But in the middle of it, she's like, oh, this whole campaign is around let's go, ! And it's not YMCA going, we've been here for 165 years and you should be really proud of us and you should celebrate us and give us money. It's like, no, it's a community asset. And it's the people in this community who we get to invest in for the next 165 years. And so, it was cool, because then we, developed the story and the positioning, all the kind of normal marketing stuff underneath it. But this really simple phrase of let's go. And it's like, it's a forward thinking, it's got movement, it's got good energy. And people like you got to come alongside, and we did this all together. And that's the beauty of how Paige built that, was she was clear on where she needed help, and we're just really dang happy for them.
It was cool to see how the extension of the way you guys helped them frame and synthesize that story manifested into action over the course of last year too. So when they started their podcast, for instance, I'll just give you a quick example. They started their podcast in a studio, and they moved, in every episode of their podcast is now done on location, and they're curating stories of people that have been impacted
I love that.
by the why. So it gets back to the connection. It gets back to the creativity, which I'll be honest with you, presents a number of challenges for us. Podcasting out of a pool requires one of our videographers to get, he's like, do I have to wear a swim shirt for this? I'm like, yes, you can't be half naked in the pool. You're getting in the pool. You can't be half naked. You need to wear a swim shirt for this. So, but it's cool. The whole Let's Go approach got them out of the studio, back into the community. And it was cool to see how that manifested. So I had asked you about that for sure.
Gosh, wow. That story resonates me because I know the YMCA of Greater Kansas City very well. And they have one of my, very favorite CEOs in the world there, Mark, and I know Paige and her team. And wow, they had a dream team with you two guys for sure. And nobody produces a podcast like Brent. So I'm quite sure that he can pull that off by the swimming pool. But anyway, I want to shift gears because you were recently a keynote speaker for us at the KCIBC Business Communicators Summit. You did obviously a fantastic job, but I have to tell you that there was a little bit of trepidation prior to that. So I'm sitting there having lunch, right? And I've got my lunch, and I hadn't met Judge Justin at that time. I'd heard about him, and I'd seen the Firestarter philosophy. Okay, yeah, who's the keynote speaker or whatever. And he brings in this box of kitchen matches. There's probably, Brent, you weren't there. There were probably like 40 or 50 boxes of kitchen matches. Now, this gave me some concern on a couple levels. Number one is, it's my job to continue to have BCS at KU Edwards campus, and my boss there, our great Vice Chancellor, Dr. Stuart Day, is very welcoming and things like that. But I'm sitting here thinking, I know the smoke alarms here are going to just go crazy if this guy has us all, do some sort of a, fire starting dance or something, right? So I know we're in the ballroom. So anyway, just a short story to say, it all worked out great. Justin did a fantastic job, and
nothing burned down.
Nothing burned down. The smoke alarms didn't go off because I think maybe on my first year there, somebody lit a candle in their cubicle, and all 150 employees had to go out on the street. So I'm like, oh my God, we're gonna. But no, everything worked great, and I think the matchbooks were more of a metaphor, and I'll let him talk a little bit about that with Firestarter philosophy because that's what I want to ask you about. So let's talk a little bit about that because I know you introduce different concepts within that curiosity. You've talked to us about clarity already, compassion, consistency. When you're working with leaders, I really love this question. Which of these do you see leaders struggle with the most? And why do you see it that way?
I'm sorry to cause trepidation. I was...
Worked out great. Don't go change.
Yeah, I should have brought our intern that day because, handing out 150 little matchboxes on those tables took a little bit of time. But I think it mattered because what I wanted people to walk away with was just a visual, simple reminder of how to prioritize care in the corporate context. And Matt, I think what comes to mind for me is the most difficult chunk of the book to write was the section on clarity. And because I think, putting aside the heavy-handed command and control leader who needs maybe an injection of care, I think generally speaking, there's been this really awesome movement of heart in the workplace, and people are trying to care for the people and care for themselves and have work-life balance and all this stuff, right? And so I think the days of the really heavy-handed, rigid cultures aren't as prevalent. Of course, it still exists, and those people can read a different book. What this book is about is the leader who, like me, errs on the side of being nice instead of being kind. And I think clarity is the work that's hard for a leader who does give a damn. But when they're unclear on expectations, when they don't name their standards, when they don't hold people accountable, I tell a story in the book of essentially firing a guy and letting him talk me into staying and then firing him again on Monday because I was too scared to hurt his feelings and tell him the truth. And I did a horrible job along the way of giving him honest feedback of where he was missing the mark. And instead I was just kind of like, I hope it goes well. And man, maybe he'll turn it around. And you start making these comments like, well, he's a great guy. You say all this stuff, which is just my own avoidance. It was my own avoidance of giving him actual honest feedback. And so that's what screamed to the surface for me when you said that was, I think in today's tricky, hybrid and work from home and all the stuff that people want to do, which is great. If a leader can't be clear on what the expectations are and what the standards are, the team's craving it. They want clarity. High performers want to know what the damn metric is and the scorecard is. and they want to know if they're meeting it or not. And if the leader can't get clear on that, that creates this big void, back to stories, big void of everything filled in that gap between vision that's not clear and expectations of the team is filled with frustration on all levels. And so I'm a work in progress on that. That's consistently stuff I've got to get stronger and clearer on. But yeah, that's what came to mind for me, Matt.
Let's talk about leadership, because it's been kind of been a through line through this conversation. So your work blends leadership, culture, and that dreaded M word. I know you don't want to say, but it does, it is the Cultivated Marketer podcast. We do talk marketing and communications. So I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming the person that brings you and your team in is the marketing leader, or maybe it's a communications leader that brings you in. So you're working alongside these leaders. How do you think they should be thinking differently about their role inside an organization, especially as it pertains to leadership and culture?
Yeah, I think, and maybe it's just because I read Essentialism in the last couple of weeks, but I think we're not struggling for information or new ideas or a new tactic. And so I think the work, Julie, is a lot of really simple practices like, hey, are we connecting to our team? Yeah, we have this open door policy. Why does nobody ever come in? Well, because we haven't gone to them. I think getting simple and clear and actually looking at the stuff that leaders may tend to avoid, myself included, right? But I do think it's the brave work to look in the mirror and do your own work to say, am I growing in curiosity? Am I growing in compassion? Am I growing in clarity? And am I growing in consistency? And as from a leadership standpoint, that's why I based it all on a fire, not some like theoretical framework. It's like fires take forever to build. And you got to do some weird stuff to like get it going and to keep it going and tend to it. But once it is going, then people gather around it and they feel warm and safe and open to share stories. And so I think when you're in the, at least I know the four of us, when you're in the trenches of it and you're kind of doing your best, I think to pause long enough to go like, whew, how am I doing? And then asking your team for feedback. Rachel Burnett is our COO at Guild and a partner of mine in the business. And we did this weird thing a couple quarters ago at our QBR where we sat up front and we were like, hey, tell us one thing that you appreciate about us and one thing that we have to grow in that we haven't been great at. And everybody has to answer for both of us. And talk about ego, like I'm like biting my lip. Like, I hope they tell me I'm awesome, right? Like that's kind of the ego. I hope they just tell me I'm great. But then you take a deep breath and you're like, oh, you're right. Thank you. And that's all we could say is like, thank you. And they gave courageous, and they want somebody to ask them that, but they got to believe that you actually won't hurt them with it. And that's coming back to the matchbox is like, we all have this power to strike that match and inflict pain, which I've certainly done, or strike the match and be like, yo, Jason on our team, I'm going to light your match because I'm going to grow in my kindness, curiosity, compassion, clarity, et cetera. So does that answer some of the question?
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're saying, so I work with nonprofit communicators and I'm coaching them. A lot of what I end up doing is really honestly helping them know how to manage up to their boss and then manage to their team. That is probably 95% of what I end up helping them with. And I think what I'm constantly telling people is like, you have to build rapport and trust with your leaders. You cannot just walk into any situation and just demand, and this goes to leaders and people working under leaders. Even if you have the title, that does not mean you have earned the respect or the trust. You have to build all of that. So I think your point about saying like, hey, how am I doing? Like if every single employee on every team first asked, how am I doing? And what do I need to grow in? I mean, just imagine what our teams would be like. I think they'd be so different.
And this being a show of professional development, that's a great thing to articulate for any person in any level, any role, right? Is to be able to look in the mirror and ask that question.
Yeah, and I think a very practical thing that can maybe get it into the ground level here in terms of our like meetings and rhythms in life is start every meeting with a question. Not a declaration, not a like, this is what we're doing, like legitimately, like every single, whether you're managing up, managing down, managing across, talking to your wife or your best friend or whoever, ask a question And it's so simple, but you start to pay attention to how many people show up to meetings and they start talking. Like, here's the thing, and we just go. And it's like, well, wait, like shit changed from the last time we talked about this stuff. Like if somebody would have said like, hey, is this still important today? I literally start client meetings sometimes with like, I'll set the stage and I'll say, is that the meeting you guys thought you were coming to? And they're like, yeah. Or, you know what? Like, what would be more helpful is this. And it's like, okay, cool. Let's go that way. But just like literally ask one question to start every single meeting.
But do not start an employee meeting with the question, everyone go around the room and share a surgery they've had. I actually experienced that one time and a bunch of us were like, no, you can't ask that.
No, not that.
How many privacy rules are we going to violate today?
Yeah.
Bless them. The intention was good.
Ooh, yeah, not great.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Justin. And as you were talking a bit, just on your last answer there about, just that whole thing of starting with questions and what are the right questions to ask and kind of what are we doing that you like versus we don't like. It really harkened back to me. I don't know if you guys have heard, but the Bernard Hellsberg, through the terrific hemp program he has for entrepreneurs in town, Bernard's 3 magic questions. What do you like that we are doing? What do you not like that we are doing? And then my favorite one, what are we not doing that you would like for us to do, right? So those sort of came to mind there. And I know that a lot of us, at least in this market, are very familiar with Bernard and his orientation in that way. So that really kind of came to life as you were talking there. But maybe to kind of close on the philosophy of you and your agency and the writing that you've done and that kind of thing. Why do you believe that brands that don't embrace kind of this care first mindset will struggle to stay relevant moving forward? Because obviously, if you're not relevant, right, you die on the vine pretty quickly.
Yeah. No, and the hemp, I haven't been through hemp, but I have a bunch of friends who have, and I think that his impact in the city through entrepreneurs is tremendous. So that's really cool. I'd say that if you don't prioritize your heartbeat as a business, then it is simple. I mean, it's just a matter of time before you're chasing so much complex and complicated stuff that may feel smart and intelligent and worthy, but you are slowly becoming less relevant. And to use our language, your vital signs are weakening and your clarity is going down, your connection is going down, and your creativity is going down. And you become Radio Shack, right? It's like you just, like you didn't intend to, but like you didn't make sure that your heart was strong. And so I think, we've got a long way to go in this as well, but we're starting to establish baseline understanding so that it isn't theoretical or just like a fun conversation. It's, hey, this is what's at stake. There's an assessment that we're going to come back to, and we're going to see if your vital signs are improving so that you become a stronger, healthier, more generative, more others focused brand that does give a damn about the client experience. And those are the companies that when they embrace that it isn't a choose money road or choose heart road, it's both. It's both. As Truett Cathy at Chick-fil-A said, care and commerce can coexist. And those are the ones that, like Julie talked about Hy-Vee a decade ago, those are areas that show that the heart is healthy. And now she's like, hey, it's not quite as strong. It's fixable stuff. They don't need like more technology. They need to return to humanity. And it's like, clean up the floor a little bit better, treat people a little bit nicer when they walk in. Like, this isn't crazy hard stuff. It's actually really simple, which makes it, sometimes we feel like we're shouting into these weird corners of the world going, guys, it's not that difficult, but it is a return to simple practices that make people feel delight as opposed to feeling confused or scared or annoyed.
I love all of that, not just at a corporate level. It's interesting you brought up Julie too, because what Julie offered in that story earlier too was that her heart wasn't in the mom's blog thing, but it was in nonprofit. So her personal brand, her personal mission and values, not only just the company values shifted in that way too. So I love that both from a corporate standpoint as well as the personal story that Julie shared earlier. Julie, you've set the foundation for a lot of our conversation today. So
here to serve.
If you hadn't have approached that guy at Hy-Vee and see how much more of a boring episode this would have been, Justin would have had to carry the whole thing.
And Justin, you've been absolutely amazing with us. Anything else that you'd like to mention that we may have missed in this conversation?
Oh man, I'm hopeful that I was helpful, at least to prod a conversation. And I don't have all the freaking answers. I'm out here trying to figure it out and prioritize our own growth, right? And to prioritize our people and our client experience and be honest enough to say when I missed the mark. And that's what I'm up to. So I just hope this has been helpful. I wrote a book that was really for me. It was really like my own, hey, can I get clear on how I think about this stuff? Because I kept saying give a damn and people were like, cool, what's that mean? And so I wrote 220 pages about it. You can grab that on Amazon if you're interested in it. It's just I've got it right here, big yellow cover with a MASH on the front of it, which I love. And I won't berate this and go too far down into a squirrel chasing exercise, but the creative process is just this like wonderful mix of mystery and discipline. And so like, I don't care if you buy my book. I would love it if you guys did, if somebody would. But the work of producing something creative takes such courage and vulnerability that it is to be celebrated. And so like, I think like the ask is like, if you see somebody up to something, like comment on their thing, tell them that you're cheering for them, give them a high five when you walk through a crowded restaurant. Like, we are not struggling to be criticized or embarrassed in this weird world we live in. Like people are dying just for some encouragement and some validation and some love. And I think as leaders, if we can spread some of that goodness, that would be enough.
Someone once told me everyone is insecure no matter how they present themselves. And that has stuck with me. That was advice he passed on to me to give to my daughter before she went to Missouri Girls State. It was for her. She might have forgotten about it. I remember it. So yeah, Justin, I'll tell you, my husband has bought the book, read it, highlighted it. He thought it was great. So there's another encouragement for you today.
I can't think of a better place for us to end our conversation. Justin, you've been absolutely a joy to be with today. I so appreciate you joining us.
Thank you all for having me. Really grateful.
Thanks for coming, Justin.
Thanks.
If you found value in today's episode, check us out on our website, CultivatedMarketer.com. You'll also be able to subscribe to us, rate us, and leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Remember, a garden of opportunity grows with Cultivated Marketer.